So what if we want to store something a bit more complex into local storage? Well, let's create an object. We're going to call it foo. We'll give it a couple of keys of bar. We'll give it a string value of baz, and we'll say quug is equal to 42. So if I was to console.log foo, I could go over here and I could see my value for foo. Well, let's attempt to save it in local storage. And so I will type here window.localStorage, and I'm going to set item, and I'll say foo is equal to foo. And if I end up doing that, and I go to my application, I'll look and I'll see that all it did is stored it as a string. It's always a string, and it's actually a string that's got these brackets with the word object in it, which is not going to be all that helpful. The reason why it ended up doing this is that if I see what console.log, all objects have a toString method. And if I go back to my console, I'll see the toString method of a plain old object is just going to be the string, object, and object. So how do I solve this? Well, instead of calling toString here, what I could end up doing is I can say JSON.stringify. So taking an object and converting it to a string is one of the things that you can end up doing with this JSON object. So not only can you stringify an object, but you can parse it as well. Now if I go back here, I'll see what this did is it took the object, and this is actually a string. If I go and do type of on this, I'll see that it is a string, and it's a string in JSON format. One of the reasons why you know it's JSON format is that all of the keys are double quoted. The values, if they are strings, are double quoted. This value is an integer, so it's not. And now, what I could end up doing is that instead of saving the object just as the object, I can stringify it. And if I can stringify it, so now let's take this out, let's refresh, and if we go over here, we'll see, in fact, that the value ended up getting saved. Here it is as this string. And again, it's definitely a string. If I come over here and I say window.localStorage, and I say get item of foo, and let me console log this. So again, I'm using set item and get item. And if I end up doing this, and I refresh, and I go to my console, I'll see that this is that same string. And I can prove that by going over here and saying type of, and it tells me it's a string. If I want to convert it back to an object, so in other words, if I ended up going over here and decided to pull this out, now I've got it in local storage, so I'm going to comment these lines out because it's already there. And if I was to go over here and say foo equals this, and I was to console log and say foo, give me your value for bar, I would end up getting undefined because that's just a string. So if you end up stringifying it when you put it in local storage, you've got to end up parsing it when you end up pulling it out of local storage. So stringify turns it into a string. Parse, assuming that it was stringified with JSON data, will end up taking it as a string and converting it to an object. And again, I could figure that out by going over here and saying, what is the type of foo, now that I ended up parsing it, and I'll see that it is an object.